It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. So we are in a fabulous series, something that has brought out multiple conversations and information and insight. And it's how to be a visionary leader during unexpected times. And I've had the pleasure and the honor to talk with leaders who, in no other way of putting it is this is not their first rodeo. Now, not all unexpected times look the same by any means. They never look the same. Yet there's so much to learn. And today's guest, Mark S.A. Smith, has a book out that's called Scale Your Business Now that summarizes what he delivers. He works with business owners and executives on how to take back control of the business and guarantee more profits in 120 days. Now, what's really interesting about Mark is he started his own boutique consulting company back in 1990. He's researched and developed executive leadership, business models, and go-to-market methods to predict conduct successful executive level meetings when multiple people must come to a conclusion and make important decisions. And that's the heart of what we've been living for the last several months is how to be the best leader we can, draw great conclusions based on the evidence we have at this time, and make the decisions that keep business moving forward. So thank you, Mark, for joining me here today.
It's an honor to be here, Ivy. Let's deliver some ideas.
So just share a little bit is you have traveled the world and have lived through a few different unexpected times being a business owner and leader since the early 90s. Indeed.
Yes, I've been paid to work in 54 countries. I've spoken on 6 continents. I'm looking for that last gig in Antarctica. Maybe I'll have to take a cruise down there and speak on the ship so I can check that one off the box, although it really doesn't matter. The point that is this: I have learned that around the world, leadership principles fundamentally remain the same. There are some differences in culture, but as humans, we are pretty much wired the same. And so anytime that we get into a crisis, we all tend to react in a certain way. And as leaders, it's good to understand what those ways are so then we can work with that and lead people to be their best, even in the middle of a crisis.
So some of the companies you work with, and over the many, many years, as you've worked with various businesses and spoken on so many stages, and a writer who has multiple books out there, we just highlighted one today. What do you see in great leadership actions, traits, when we have these unexpected times?
Indeed. Well, the first thing is that all great leaders understand the fundamental principle of leadership is solve for mindset first. When you're running across challenges,
I love that. I'm going to repeat it just so our listeners really get that, because I think it is a cornerstone. Solve for mindset first.
Yes. Because unless I know the mindset that person's in, I cannot give them any direction whatsoever. One of the principles of leadership is you must understand context. And the reason why is because context makes everything make sense. Is it good to kill somebody? It depends. If you're at war, you become a hero. If it's somebody breaking into your house, it's self-defense. If it's killed out of anger, it's murder. It's all about context. Context 100% makes things make sense. And out of context, you can't lead people. So the first thing we have to do is understand their mindset, because that's the beginning of all motivation for action is mindset. And when we're in a crisis, what happens is people tend to freak out. They're afraid, and they'll either fight or flight, freak or freeze. And as leaders, we must understand what they're afraid of and help them move out of that fear space. And one of the most powerful tools for this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know that.
And you're right. It is so important to move out of fear, because fear paralyzes us. And
Indeed.
when we are paralyzed, we do not take action. The
Indeed.
more we're not in action, the less we can move through anything.
Indeed. Fear displaces curiosity. And curiosity is the element that's required for excellence in all businesses. So the first thing we have to do is understand where people are on Maslow's hierarchy. Let's just go through that very quickly. Maslow's has 5 levels of needs that he identified in a paper back in the 40s. And the bottom level is physiological needs. You have to be able to breathe, have food, water. You have to be able to know that your body is safe, and that you're going to be stuck at that level. If you're starving, there's nothing else you can think about. If you have a very full bladder, that's the only thing you can focus on until you can take care of the problem. And so right now in the crisis that we've been through, this has been a level 1 crisis because people are afraid of dying. This nasty, nasty virus attacks the lungs. You can't even breathe. People suffocate to death. It's horrible. And so when people think that could be a possibility, they move down to level 1 of Maslow's. The next level up, level 2, is psychological needs. And that is that you have work, you have a place to stay, you have an infrastructure around you that supports you. And so that's the next level up. And of course, the way Maslow's work is that wherever you happen to be in the moment is where you will be pegged. And so these problems that we've run across is that people don't know how to handle these kinds of crises. Unfortunately, in our culture, we live from paycheck to paycheck. So when your job's interrupted, you're Maslow's level 1 and 2. And what happens is, since people don't have plans, they end up buying toilet paper. They have to do something, anything. And that's what the anything is that they do. As we move up Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom 2 levels are rooted in fear. And the top 2 levels are the top 3 levels are rooted in hope. And the opposite of fear is hope. So the next level up is belonging. So you're part of a tribe, you're part of a family, you're part of a team. Next level up is self-esteem. You value yourself. You understand that you bring value to the world beyond just what you contribute to the team. Then the top level is self-actualization. And that's where all creativity works. This is where we go when we want to solve problems. And this is looking at data objectively, not subjectively, through a filter or a lens. And as leaders, we have to operate at that top level because we're dragging people forward. Okay, we're leading people forward. And so
we plan to lead people forward. Every so often, you drag a couple strays.
Indeed. So the first place we have to start is what's the mindset of our self? Are we at those lower 2 levels operating in fear? Then we have to do everything we can to pull ourselves out of that fear space up into our hope space. So let's talk about fear and hope for just a moment. Fear is the expectation of an undesired outcome. Fear is the expectation of an undesired outcome. And it's usually some kind of loss. Loss of health, loss of strength, loss of money, loss of possessions, loss of relationships, loss of life. And all of those are in play right now. And the opposite of fear is hope. Hope is the expectation of a desired outcome. Now, what's really interesting is that we tend to believe our fears and doubt our hopes. And the only way we can get to excellence is to reverse those. We have to doubt our fears and we have to believe our hopes. And so, yes?
No, I was going to say believing in our hopes. And I think as business leaders, it's so important because that's where the opportunity to have visions, see visions, move through this. On the other side of this is through this is an enormous amount of innovation that we're going to be seeing through new businesses that are created, incubators that are all of a sudden perking with ideas, creativity, and the successful ones will be followed through by actions.
Absolutely truth. Well, and I think that we can take advantage of those very quickly. Peter Drucker said that we don't thrive by solving problems. We thrive by exploiting opportunities. And the reason why is because if we solve a problem as a business, our value stops when the problem is solved. Yet when we exploit opportunities, that's where we can go out there and mine the gold and turn it into rings and sell it for 10x what it cost us to get the gold out of the ground. And exploitation is not a bad word unless it's done manipulatively. The whole idea is let's take this opportunity and turn it into a gold mine that we can mine for a long time. But to do so, our team has to see the possibility, the probability, the inevitability, the reality of that new vision.
And I think right now, in a ton of the conversations I am having in all types of levels, there is opportunities. We're in the midst of the summer. Think about a garden and all the things that are able to bud through a garden at different times. And things are coming through. There's possibility and there is opportunity out there. And then the choice is, we could walk through that field and not even see the beauty of it to get to the other side, or we could stop and see what is budding and see what we can create out of that and take those actions.
Indeed. And that's the leader's job, is to have the mindset and also the vision to identify what's out there, then translate that vision into something that is motivating for their team. And we have to align our story with their motivation if they're going to follow us. And if they don't follow us, then we'll find somebody else. It's okay. I don't expect for everybody to follow me. I only expect for those that find value in what I have to say and do to follow me. And it's the same thing for all leaders. Don't try to convert the unconvertible. That's a waste of time.
And so in some of the conversations you're having now, and you deal with large organizations all over the country, all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And small ones too.
And small ones too.
And big ones, yeah. Yeah.
So when you see leaders getting stuck today, what are some of the things that the conversation's looking like? What are some of the motivations you're helping them move through?
Well, the executives I'm coaching right now, we've had some really interesting conversations, and they've all started with, this is a spiritual problem. This is a spiritual issue. Fear of death is rooted in spiritual issues. And since this is driven by fear of death, we have to start going back to our spiritual practices. Because when you have a relationship with your higher power, however you choose to call it, doesn't matter, that energy of that creates life in the universe, when you have a relationship with that, fear disappears because you realize that you're in good hands. We live in an abundant universe that wants to live, that wants life to express itself. And as a leader, you must start in that place, your relationship with death, your relationship with life, your relationship with creation. That's the place to start because you have to be that firm person. Now, the good news is every one of my clients has a spiritual practice. And I found that to be true. Sustainable leadership starts with a spiritual practice. And the reason why is because leaders are creators. And a spiritual practice is how you channel creation from the non-physical to the physical. So that's the place we start. You have to become at peace with yourself. And from that source, then you can bring the love that is required to pull people out of fear.
I love that. Bring the love that is required to pull people out of fear.
Yes.
And so when the leader itself is grounded in a strong spiritual practice,
yes,
they then have the ability to share their love, share the love,
yes,
and pull people from being that, I'll say, fear paralysis.
Yes. That's exactly
into movement.
Right. Indeed. And the whole idea is that when you source your activity as a leader from a loving place, it is always creative. It is always healing. It is always the best for all people involved. Employees, vendors, customers, community. That's where creativity comes from. That's where healing comes from. And we really have to heal our people and we have to heal our customers because they have undergone trauma that they have never experienced in this lifetime. While we have been at war, the world has never been affected like they have today in a war like facing life or death situation. And that requires love to heal.
And, it's interesting because in identifying this and looking at it from a perspective of we're at war against a virus that we don't have a lot of information on yet. We're
Indeed.
first starting to gather more information. In our past, in our history, when we go to a war, we have more information. We know who our opponent is. We have some insight. We have that intelligence.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. We have bupkis.
Well, we actually have quite a bit. I think that the main concern is that there are political factions that are using the information, distorting the information, withholding the information for their purposes. Because the only way that you can keep a population down is make them afraid.
Yeah.
and have them reach out to you for help. Well, that doesn't work long-term in the society. This is a temporary situation. But that said, yes, the issue is that we're facing the unknown. And in that situation where we face the unknown, what we have to do is fundamentally become defensive. So we have to create an environment that allows us to be safe, move out of Maslow's bottom two levels. And in organizations, we've done that by, hey, stay at home. You're safer at home. And there's some truth to that. And the end result is that we have radically pivoted our capacity as a world to conduct business remotely from home in the comfort of your own space with the food that you have, and to do so 24/7. And it's been absolutely magnificent. I saw that a financial institution will be in the future having 80% of their workers operate from home. Financial institution. I mean, these people usually put together big buildings in big cities and make everybody commute. Nope, not anymore. Big change.
There is big change coming, and there is something heartfelt in some of the things that's happening. Is families are getting back together and doing things together. Notice more game playing, notice more families out for walks together, where it used to be that certain age brackets would be on those technology devices, games, et cetera. Now there's more conversation. The whole relationship building is going back to actually picking up the phone and having conversations with people, not hacking at one another, meaning using your thumbs to text or your fingers to type. We are conversing, we're listening more to one another, we're engaging in things that are doing things together, not just sitting at the table doing things singularly.
Indeed. It's really lovely to see. I've seen people flying kites for the first time in decades. Woo! Yeah. Go down to the store, buy a kite, put it in your car. Next time it's windy, go fly a kite.
So in the work that you're doing currently, so you mentioned a little bit about your executive levels, your executive coaching you're doing right now, and it's all based in spirituality. You also touch the smaller businesses, which we have a lot of listeners in that small business zone who are making their first round of really tough decisions out there.
Indeed, they are. First of all, I want to point out that the work I do isn't based in spirituality. It's based on principles.
Yes.
And spirituality is a base principle, and we usually spend a small amount of time on. And there are challenges that my executives face. That the answer is my coaching is use your spiritual tools. That is the solution that is really the best one to start with, and then out of that you'll get inspiration to solve the problems. But the work that I do is based on helping people understand the principles of business that are universal. They work worldwide. They work for every business. And the reason why it's based on what's required for a business to be successful. And it's a combination of two different sets of information. One is the skills that every leader must possess if they're going to be a sustainable leader that has a growth path. And the second one is business acumen. Unfortunately, a lot of small businesses don't have business acumen. They're really good at one or two areas, but they miss in some of the key areas that are required for them to grow successfully and also protect their business from aggressive competition. And so I teach people those principles, and then I help them implement those principles in their business through specific models that I've generated that allow us to use context to identify what portion of the model is going to be effective right now. Since context is so important, you cannot have business models that operate outside of context. And solving for mindset is about what is the context I'm working with right now, which is an important principle. So if you wish, I can run through, for example, the leadership skills.
Let's go through this.
I think this is really important. There's 7 of them that
Listeners, I was going to say, this is the time to get that pen and paper out and make some notes.
All right, take some notes here and actually rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. How good are you? 1 is, boy, I need some help. Number 5 is world-class, written books. Consult on this. And so a lot of you will be 2s, 3s, and 4s. This is what I suspect will be the case. So number 1, got to have it, is presence. As a leader, you must be able to take control of people's attention and hold their attention. If you don't have presence, you cannot lead. Influence 101, get their attention. And so presence is a combination of authenticity, vulnerability, and the ability to be transparent about your heart. So people will not follow leaders that are not authentic. They won't. They'll follow them for a short period of time. They might be seduced, but they will not be sustainable. So you must have presence. And we can work on that because for a lot of people, it's about sensitivity and balance and how they observe the world, their team, themselves, things, ideas. It's that balance of how you observe those elements. The second level is you must have personal discipline. You must have personal discipline. You have to be able to control your cognitive capacity. You have to control your time. You have to be able to delegate safely and securely. You have to have the ability to do the things that need to be done at the time they need to be done. And you can't let mood get in your way. Don't feel like it is not a leadership skill. And as our mutual friend Sarah Victory says, mood spelled backwards is doom.
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 Exactly. It can't be, I'm not in the mood to do this. I'm not feeling it right now.
Not feeling it right now. Might be good if somebody's trying to toss a monkey your direction, but it's not a good way to run a company. All right.
Exactly.
Number three is you have to have foresight. A leader is directing their company into the future where the customer money will be.
Repeat that because there's a little word in your second half of that sentence, directing the company where the customer's money will be.
That's correct.
And that's the foresight piece.
That's foresight. And we're ripping off Wayne Gretzky's I skate to where the puck's going to be.
Yeah.
But we're doing it from a leadership standpoint. And so one of my mantras that I pounded into the heads of my clients is a leader creates a future that does not yet exist using methods that have not yet been invented with best practices that have yet to be established. We truly are trailblazers. We are innovating the future and somebody's got to do it. And you get well paid for taking those risks. That's foresight. And I can teach people how to look into the future. There's some really interesting strategies that are quite effective and extremely accurate when it comes to large scale pictures. Small things, hard to predict the future. Big things, yeah, easy to predict the future. All right, number 4, you have to have business acumen. You have to have business acumen. One of my friends turned around 37 companies as part of he was an interim CEO. People bring him to turn around companies. In 100% of the cases, the problem was a lack of reporting. They had no idea what was going on in their company. And that's an indication of lack of business acumen. Mm-hmm. And then 70% of the time, there was a pirate in the organization. A pirate is somebody who comes and intentionally attempts to steal the company assets or cash. And 70% of the time, there was a pirate. I've had to help 8 of my clients eject pirates from their companies. And the reason why these pirates got in is, number 1, lack of reporting. And number 2, because the leadership abdicated responsibility for key business acumen components. So finance person comes in and says, I'll take care of the finance for you. Well, unfortunately, one of my dear clients just got ripped off for $1 million. His company may not make it. 100% fraud. So, there's a situation where he should have been looking after the numbers and he didn't. He trusted this person.
And trust is a beautiful thing, but that does not alleviate responsibility. And when you're in the leadership role, when you're in the CEO, the buck stops with you. You must know your numbers. It doesn't matter how great of a CFO you might have, an accountant, bookkeepers, how big of a controller or anybody else. The buck stops with you and the responsibility is held with you.
So the answer is very simple. Trust and verify.
Yeah. You have to trust and verify.
Trust is not sufficient. You must verify. Yet to verify, you have to understand what questions to ask and understand the parameters that make sense. And I teach that to my clients. So they have business acumen. They understand what questions to ask in every critical aspect of their business. And it's maybe we can do this another time. We can go through some business acumens, just some quick concepts, not today, but another time. All right. So that's number 4. Number 5 is you must have solid communication skills. And this is about context, once again, understanding how the person you're speaking to receives the words that you're uttering to them or you're writing to them, and packaging that information using words, phrases, methods that they will get. And this is the number one thing I do when I do team building with executive teams. We start off by helping people understand each other's communication strategy. And the reason why is because no team can be built unless they understand and respect their worldviews for processing information. How a CFO looks at the world is radically different than how a CEO looks at the world, which is radically different than how a sales VP looks at the world, which is radically different than how an accountant looks at the world. And they all process information using different filters. And so you have to understand what those filters are and how, as a leader, you have to adjust your filters to receive their information accurately and adjust your filters so that you can transmit information to them accurately. Absolutely critical to long-term success.
I cannot agree more. A few years ago, I was introduced to a potential client, and they said, we'd like you to go out to California and work with our leadership team there and raise their level of leadership, blah, 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 blah. We had this lovely conversation. And I said, okay. So came back and I put together a scope. And the scope started with, well, we're going to start with communication. Like, no. We want you to work in leadership. We heard you're a leadership expert. And I said, that's lovely. And we'll be starting with communication.
Absolutely true. The leadership has to be the communicator in chief, especially in crisis.
Absolutely. And too often we allow communication to fall a few notches down or too many notches down. And wherever it's not first is too many notches down. So Mark.
Yes. So that's number 5. You want the other 2?
Yes. Give us the last 2. And
we'll wrap that up. So number 6 is you have to be able to negotiate and persuade. And the reason why is, as a leader, we're negotiating everything. We're negotiating with our team, with our vendors, with our customers. We're negotiating with our government. We're negotiating with our landlords. We're negotiating with our spouse and kids. Hell, sometimes you even negotiate with yourself. But the point is that you have to be able to have those negotiating conversations. One of the sad things that I see is most of the time, my clients' customers have better negotiating skills than my clients do. And they leave massive amounts of profit on the table. So one of the things we have to do is we have to clean up those profit leaks by teaching people how to keep more margin. And I wrote a book on that back in the 90s that was specifically deals with the dirty tricks that are played by buyers to take money and keep it in their pocket. So you must be able to negotiate and persuade. And then the 7th one is you have to have the capacity to make sound decisions, unbiased decisions, using incomplete data. And so decision-making skills is critical to leadership without a doubt. And I teach people how to approach making decisions that they can then stand behind and also make without fear. That's the 7, and you have to have all 7. You must have all 7 if you're going to be a successful leader.
And so how can our listeners know more about you, know more and find out more information about your brilliance, your teachings, and learn that smidgen bit after our interview today?
I love it. Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. First of all, if anything that I've said triggers, I need to talk to this guy, reach out to me, mark.smith@bijaco.com, mark.smith@bijaco.com. I'll be glad to give anybody 20 minutes. Delighted to do that. We can figure out ways to work together. Second thing is that if you would like to understand the things I talk about on a regular basis, join me on LinkedIn. Marks on LinkedIn.com, MARKS on LinkedIn.com will take you directly to my profile. Let's say, listen, I heard you on Ivy's podcast. I want to connect. I have more than 150 articles that are directed at leaders in a variety of the topics we've talked about today. And so there's plenty of resources there. And yeah, you go to my website, but more people go to LinkedIn than go to my website. So, hey, that'll work.
Fabulous. And listeners, know that everything Mark just shared are in the show notes. So do not panic saying, hey, did he say an S? What was that exactly? Do not panic. And so often the information is here right in front of us. So hear me and hear me well. Take a look below, click that piece of information, take those actions. And while you're there, click subscribe and join us every Monday as a new episode is released with more fabulous interviews, some great content with fabulous leaders out there. Lastly, as I leave you today, remember, let us know, let me know, let my team know. I check this regularly. I want to know what your biggest takeaways were. What hit you? What was your bullseye today? That gives us the ability to bring more great content and more information and insight to you. When in doubt, thanks for sharing and joining us today at Her Success Story, where we interview great and gutsy women and a bunch of fabulous men as well. See you next time.
Don't need your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.